Warning. The following video contains spoilers for Season 2 of Abbott Elementary. Viewer discretion is advised.
Wait. Whoa. Oh my god.
Whoa. Wait a minute.
Holy Wait, that's so beautiful. Yo.
I really love it.
No show has dominated the timeline like Abbott Elementary has these past few years. It's so popular that this billboard actually went viral recently. Of all the show's hilarious and heartwarming moments, none looms larger in my mind than this one.
Oh, but no, really, you should smell this one. It smells so good.
And so, in celebration of Abbott's third season, I decided to recreate Janine and Gregory's iconic kiss in miniature format.
Chapter 1. Furniture. 2 chairs, 2 little desks, 1 big desk. Alright, so using this image as a reference, I'm starting by cutting a piece of balsa wood to make the seat of the chair. Once it's cut, I shave down the sides using my X-Acto knife to taper the front of the seat. I use some sandpaper to smooth out the taper even more so the seat is comfortable enough to make anyone want to sit on it! Using a coffee stirring stick, I start making the backing of the chair. I split the stick in half to make 2 thinner sections, which eventually will be placed perpendicular to the seat. Then, using the width of the seat as a guide, I start measuring out and cutting some slats that will make the backing of the chair. I cut a skewer for the bottom support that connects the chair's seat to its base. Using a compass, I draw a circle on this piece of balsa wood that will become the base of the chair. I cut it out by cutting straight lines around the circle until there's less and less excess material, and finish the whole thing off by sanding it smooth. With my pin vise, I drilled a hole into the circular base I just cut, and now it's time to glue everything together. I had to make 2 of these bad boys, so I made the other one off camera. On to the next, I'm making 2 tiny desks. Now, this might not be the type of tiny desk content you're used to on YouTube, but I think Usher put it perfectly when he said, "Watch this." I'm starting off with a combination of balsa wood and coffee stirring sticks to make the upper section of the desk. I cut the very top of the desk larger than the bottom so that there wouldn't be any seams visible from the top. Now, the presence of seams isn't really an issue here because these will eventually be completely covered in flocking. However, the Stefan you see making these desks doesn't realize that yet, so shh, don't tell him. The bottom section of the desk is pretty much identical to the bottom section of the chairs I just made, so I'm cutting another round piece of balsa wood, drilling a hole in it, and combining that with a cut section of skewer. Last but certainly not least is the big desk. I'm starting this one off by gluing together 3 coffee stirring sticks to make a hefty mega stick that I'll use for the legs of the desk. The mega stick is then cut into 6 mini mega sticks and set aside for later. Next, I'm cutting out 7 panels of balsa wood. These will make up the front, sides, and back of the desk. For all these parts, I kind of just make up the measurements as I go and hope that everything fits together. Usually it does, but occasionally a piece will need to be shaved down if too big or remade if too small. Now that all the pieces are cut, I lay them out in an aesthetic way to maximize visual deliciousness and get to gluing. I start with the back, attaching legs on either side, slowly making my way forward, adding side panels and more legs until the desk starts coming to life. Once it's fully sentient, I add some glue to the top and throw in the last few details like the writing surface and these drawer handles. After giving each piece a white coat of primer and then a brown base coat, all the furniture items were complete. Chapter 2. Figures. Janine and Gregory.
This part of the video is primarily visual, so as I show you how I created the 3 modeled parts of this miniature, I'm also going to share with you the story of how I first became familiar with Quinta Brunson. It's November 15th, 2014, and I'm running late. Typically, when I went to events on campus, I like to stake out a spot in the back so I could slip out if the event just wasn't really my vibe. But as I arrived to Bruin Fest, the only seats left were in the very front row. Now, at the time of this event, I'm a wallflower 2 months into my freshman year of college, and the last thing I wanted was to be sitting front row at a student comedy event. And yet, due to my chronic lateness, That's exactly where I was. What I was dreading is something that stand-up comedians do called crowd work. Crowd work is essentially where comedians interact with and make jokes about members of the audience. You've likely seen viral videos of this on any of the various vertical video platforms. The closer you are to the stage, the easier it is for a comedian to see you, and thus the more likely you are to be roped into crowd work. And as I mentioned before, I was sitting in the front row. I sat through 4 or 5 student comedians, slouching in my chair, trying to make my 6'2" frame as small as possible so I wouldn't be singled out. And to my surprise, it worked. I made it all the way to the headliner without a single reference, so I was feeling pretty good and enjoying the show. Now, the headliner that evening was none other than Miss Quinta Brunson. And as the student newspaper would later describe, she emerged on stage to rowdy applause and immediately jumped into crowd work. After describing her premature departure from college to pursue her passions, she turns to me and asks what I was studying at UCLA. In a mixture of delight and late teen awkwardness, I look at her and say, cognitive science? Confusion spreads across her face as she asks, why did you say it like you don't know the answer? The audience laughs. I laugh. I reply, I guess I forgot. She makes another face that garners even more laughter from the audience and says, well, at least you're cute, as she moves on to her next joke. I remember walking back to my dorm in the cool, crisp November air and being excited to share that story with my friends. Before it happened, I was dreading it, but once it had, I was delighted by it. I hadn't felt singled out. Her energy was warm and kind, and in that moment I felt seen. And it's kind of funny that all these years later, I still feel the same way when I watch Abbott Elementary.
Chapter 3, Flocking, Flowers and Foliage. So by this point, you're probably wondering what exactly flocking is. Well, besides sounding like iMessage's second guess after ducking for my favorite expletive, flocking is the process of placing small particles, or flock, onto a surface. In the context of this miniature, flocking refers to adding all the flowers, grass, leaves, and other plant materials that are vital to this scene. I started out with the base of the chairs. After smearing glue on them, I work my way around, adding flowers pink and white as if the ground were black and yellow. The materials here are so small that I'm using a wooden skewer to help guide things into place. Up next, the bases of the little desks get a similar treatment, a layer of glue followed by a nice mixture of flowers. The top sections of the desks get a heaping helping of clump foliage stuck all over them. Clump foliage mimics the texture and look of shrubbery and has a soft, spongy feel to it. Now, you only get a few glimpses of it on the show, but the big desk is a really important part of this scene. Completely covered in flowers, it serves as the backdrop to Janine and Gregory's romantic first kiss. For me, the only way to recreate that impact was to hand place over 200 miniature flowers all over the desk's exterior. Given the amount of flowers covering the desk, the time I spent fine-tuning the balsa wood structure of it might seem unnecessary. But to me, those details are physical manifestations of care, and it brings me joy knowing that beneath all those flowers lies something beautiful in its own regard. Alright, so now that I've finished the desk and finished patting myself on the back, I started working on the base for this project. I cut out a 5.6-inch piece of foam board and painted it with a mixture of Mod Podge and black paint. Then I started using that same clump foliage material to make the grassy floor of the miniature. This would prove to be a mistake. As good as this looks in a top-down shot, the scale of these clumps was way too jumbo massive, so I ended up ditching this base and trying a different strategy for the grass. I loaded up my static grass applicator with some 2mm medium green grass and let it rip. This had a much more consistent look and the scale felt much more appropriate for this project. Using another piece of cut foam board, I added these 2 painted coffee stirring sticks and then embarked on the single most time-consuming part of this project. Did you see it? That 1 second of leaves being added took me over 5 hours. Why did it take me 5 hours? Because each leaf needed to be added by hand, one by one, and there are over 1,000 of these leaves on this wall. This part of the mini really tested my patience, but at the end of the day, it's one of my favorite parts, so it was definitely worth it in the end. A final detail that I added were these terrarium backpacks that are featured prominently in this scene. Using some open-face backpacks that I designed and 3D printed, I filled them with clump foliage, added the top layer of flowers, and sealed all that in with some sheets of clear plastic. Chapter 4: Assembly. The assembly process begins with me attaching the terrarium backpacks to the back of the chairs. I used embroidery thread soaked in PVA glue for the straps. Next, I laid down a layer of glue to attach the grass base I made to the display stand. I spread the outermost dabs of glue inward to reduce spillage once the base is put into place. Once the grass is secured, I add in the leaf-littered back wall. Now all that's left to do is add the rest of the elements onto the grass base. Lastly, I place a bouquet of flowers onto the big desk. Thank you so much to anyone who has made it this far in the video. Making this was a labor of love, so I hope you've loved watching that labor. If you want to see more content like this, please consider subscribing. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions, what your favorite parts were, or if you have any recommendations for shows that could be inspirations for future projects. My name is Stefan Dismond, and this is how I made a miniature version of Janine and Gregory's Kiss from Abbott Elementary.